Weird and Worthwhile podcast.
Welcome to the show. Today we're having on my friend Nani, who is just a remarkable human and possesses the unique gift, although she might call it a curse, of being highly attuned to the emotions and to the vibration of other people around her. I find this very fascinating because she has a lot of sensory input that most people probably have to some degree, but maybe not to the point where it's actually providing them valuable information. I know she's conveyed to me before, I kind of wish I could turn this off sometimes, and I think a lot of other empaths might agree. But it's still a very curious phenomenon, and I've benefited immensely from our conversations because she's just so in touch with the way that I'm feeling without me needing to say anything. And that's such a valuable thing, especially for the people who get to interact with her. Nani is a yoga and meditation teacher. She's also a personal coach. She's worked with and taught classes all over the world. She spends a lot of time in fantastic destinations such as islands off the coast of Spain and Indonesia. She speaks 6 languages fluently, and we're going to get into such topics as how language can shape our personality and how immersion in different cultures can bring out different aspects of ourselves, and what we need to do, what we need to shift to fit in there, and what might be brought up, perhaps even unintentionally, through such immersions. We're also going to talk about emotion and their value, the value of leaning into emotive states, of listening for the intuitive wisdom that emotions may have to offer you, and a great host of other things. So I loved this conversation, and I hope you do too. Hello and welcome.
Nani, where are you beaming in from?
I am leaning in from Tenerife right now, which is one of the 7 islands of Canary Islands. It's actually, they say, the 7 main islands of Canary Islands relate to the chakra system. And Tenerife is the island of the heart chakra. It has Spain's highest mountain, which is the Teide, they say. So that's Teide. And he's watching all his children here.
I can see why you chose that one. I mean, for multiple reasons, but knowing you, and we've known each other for some time, the heart chakra speaks to you, your expression, at least as far as I'm able to see you.
Yeah, actually, like that's what I feel here on the island by nature. Like just today again, I had this moment, it's like, wow, I just feel so drawn to the nature here. And oftentimes when I look at the mountains or the trees or the ocean here, it feels like such a warm and loving embrace. And the same sensation I have with a lot of local people who are from the island, which is one of the main reasons why I stayed on this island and am staying for so long. Um, yeah, it seems a lot from the heart. I just came back to the island from a trip last week on, I believe, Wednesday, and I came from Germany, and then I kind of came like with a more German colored energy and mindset. Well, energy more. I landed and I stepped out of the airport, and then just like, yeah, seeing people, speaking to people, was like, dropping like into my heart, because I feel this is like, I mean, yeah, probably not everyone, but like the general color is truly, especially of local people from this island.
Are you German?
Yeah, I'm half German, half Taiwanese.
Cool, that's a cool combo.
So
Nice.
something that Chris and I have discussed before is just this, is language and the kind of inability of language to totally convey the inner world of another person to its recipient. And Nani, how many languages do you speak fluently?
Depends how you see it. So fluently, like around 6.
6. Okay. So you have some exposure to different cultures and the language that they speak. And so you
Yeah, for
have
sure.
some insight. Now, just as you said, that there's kind of a heart energy to the people on the island of Tenerife. And then there's a bit of a different thing going on, maybe a bit more business oriented or achievement oriented thing in German. Um,
I mean, it's generalizations, right? Like if you look at the
it's a lot
individual
of
person, of
generalization.
course it can differ. It's just like
Yeah.
generalizing it. But in general, it actually fits in stereotypes that you have of German people. Like in general, Germany is way more linear and like I guess like more like a bit compartmentalized way of like thinking and like it is more like structure oriented. I mean, that's the perfect stereotype you have Germans, right? Like, you know, with all the engineering and their plans and like how they are structured and all of those things. And Tenerife is like it's a mix. Like it has more order than South America, but it is definitely more Latin than Germany. So it is, yeah, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's like a feeling. Um, and it's a combination of things. You often have like a different vibe on islands. You have a different vibe on warmer climates generally. But yeah, I mean, what I feel with my heart is just that it's like very caring, very from the heart. And looking at it from outside, it's yeah, it has influence from Europe and South America. So it has um, elements of those two generalized regions combined.
You
How
feel like you inhabit a different like personality or a different part of yourself as you're speaking in a different language when you're immersed in one of these cultures. Maybe not like
Mhm.
one of those or the others, or even additional cultures that you speak the language of. But do you feel like you take on a new persona, or you actually find yourself inhabiting your mannerisms or your being in a different way as you're speaking that language?
Yeah, so that's like it's not a black and white answer, you know, like because of course it's always still me, but of course I also like take a different mannerisms, for example, like it's actually like depending on who I speak to. If I speak to like very body language expressive people, I find myself like taking on very like body language expressive mannerisms. And so, I mean, the core and the center is the same as me, but then how I speak and how I express and how I behave, I don't know, most often than not, if not always, it's like it's adapting to whoever I'm speaking to.
so
And
when I
yeah.
when I like speak Spanish, I'm actually comfortable saying things in Spanish that maybe I would hesitate to say in English because I don't
Mhm.
have the same connection to those words in Spanish that I do in English because obviously
Mhm.
English is my native tongue.
Yeah, I find that I mean, I used to be quite a chameleon when I was younger, and I could really get along with anyone. And part of that, I think, is because I actually mimic people's body language very readily when I'm speaking to them. So whatever way people are emoting with their hands, I kind of start responding in kind, and that establishes some level of commonality, or the person. But this has never been a conscious thing that I was intending to do, but but I think there is some perhaps research into that, but there's some understanding that as someone has their own body language mimicked back to them, they feel seen and heard and they feel understood. And there's kind of a bridge of understanding that's established there.
Yeah, I guess it's like the same, like, you know, like different languages in terms of like English, Spanish, and so on. You kind of speak their body language as well. So it's something that they can understand and that they understand on a subconscious level as well.
So I'm wondering, how long did it take for you to kind of tune into the island vibes that you're on? And the reason I ask is because I'm thinking about going to Spain this winter, so I don't have to live in New England in the winter again. So I'm and I'm wondering like I've really never experienced like tuning into really living in a country outside of America. So I'm wondering how long that took for you.
straight away.
Oh, you
It was
just clicked
easy.
right immediately, day one, got
Yeah,
off the plane. Yup,
yeah,
this is just, it's me. I'm here.
yeah. Straight
You,
away. I
you
mean,
pick up on things very quickly though, Nani. This is you're able to feel a little bit more, at least than most people, at
yeah.
least on
I
my
mean,
experience.
yeah, and it's like I also like to that I need to say so like I mean it's not a very foreign culture to me because I have been on Canary Islands before. I did speak Spanish before. It is still Europe. I was born and raised in Europe. Um, so when I landed on this island, yes, like it's like it clicked right away. But if I compare, for example, with India, I don't speak the language there, and I've never been there. And I'm half Asian, that's true. I'm half Taiwanese, which is like I'm also from a very spiritual family. So maybe like um, and I used to live in Indonesia for 4 years, so there has been some contact with that area of the world. But like I wouldn't say, like I landed there and I blended in. Like on the contrary, like the first day in India, I was shocked.
It's a very different culture. It has its
It's
own sort of thing
beautiful.
going on that you need to blend
Yeah.
into, or you need to. I guess maybe I'm referring to. Well, the driving situation is like you need to adapt or die. Like you need to become an Indian driver, or else it just doesn't work. You can't be a North American driver in India and expect to
Yeah.
Yeah.
live.
I think that's probably the most obvious one that people would think of when they think of India. But even just between countries, there's so many little differences that you wouldn't like. Like we don't know the water we swim in until we get out. And I'll give you a funny example. Just the other day, I actually have a new roommate moving in, and he's from Peru. And he when he came over, we were just having a conversation, and he was standing like maybe like 12 inches away from me, which was like not the same distance as you'd expect an American to stand. And I just, okay, I'm fine with it. I don't care. Like, I just thought that was so funny. Like, right off the bat, there's a clear sign that he's not from America.
Well, I think people, especially in more dense countries like India, are very used to being super close to other humans, and that's just because they are in a lot of situations. They're just very proximally located to other humans, and so you're
Oh,
right.
yeah.
The speaking distance might be 5 centimeters away, and they're just like, "Hello."
It's nice to meet you. Like, first time we ever meet there, like noses are touching.
Is that a breath lozenge? No.
Yeah. I guess like, like what we are used to and what yeah, like the standards that we have within ourselves, they kind of like um set maybe like the facility or the timing that we are having with adapting right away. And I think that's also a very important other factor, which is kind of like feeling home on a soul or personality level. So I don't know how that resonates with you, but maybe like there are aspects of your culture or your country that you don't identify with as much. And then there are others that you identify with a lot. But then when you get to a new place, and then, like maybe you haven't lived it this way in your country, your culture, but all of a sudden you feel home. It's like, oh yeah. And it's just so easy to blend in with that. It's just like, it feels like it's more natural than even in your own country.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some incongruities with me and America, although I went and lived in Florence, Italy for just 6 weeks, like downtown Florence, which is like way different than where I grew up. And like I grew up in the woods. And so I was like, oh, like I'm American. And like I used to say like, oh, I'm half Italian, half British, because that's like where my parents, grandparents came from or whatever. I'm like, oh no, I'm 100% American.
Yeah.
But
I know what you mean. Like when people say like, "What are you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm half Irish, half Scottish." No, I'm Canadian. Like I really have no
yeah.
idea what it means to be Irish or Scottish. Like I have a friend who's Scottish, and I got to know him later in my life when we were like 20 or something. His name's Fergus, and Fergus, but like that's how they
Yeah,
say it.
right, right.
Fergus. And like spending a little bit of time around him and his father, I was like, okay, I am not Scottish. Like this is they have a very different situation going on here, and I love it, but it is not like that's not my expression.
Yeah, I find it interesting as well because especially as Canadians, like you have your very special culture and country, and I believe there's maybe like I'm sure there's so many differences within Canada. And then there are your roots, right? Like you said, like, okay, Scottish, Irish, Italian. And I can imagine that that is quite interesting too, to have like this blend of cultures, genes within you. If you just see it on this like biological and geographical human form. And then if you take into account like even soul origins, then like you think it's really colorful.
Mm. Yeah, I met this woman a couple weeks ago, right? A couple months ago now, I guess. But she was really on about her Gaelic heritage, which I think is Irish, maybe. But she was just, she had spent some time in India, like myself and like you, and became very enamored with the rich spiritual traditions of that place, and just like, oh, okay, they have this ancient tradition of spirituality that extends back thousands of years, and like, how nice. And now I get to take part in that. Like, that's great. I kind of wish I had my own thing, but I'll readily take on this thing because this wasn't a part of my upbringing. But what she's discovered is that they're actually her Gaelic roots, or her ancestral roots, going back, there's a very rich spiritual tradition within that as well. And so that's a very exciting thing for her now, is to be like, oh, actually, my bloodline is really spiritual. We've just kind of lost touch with that in our modern Western world. But if
Yeah, I
I
think a
trace my
lot got
ancestry back, there's a lot to love about that.
yeah, I think a lot got lost in the transition to the new world, like coming over from Europe. So we're still very much in a young culture. Um, like it was just my my grandpa's father. So yeah, my great grandfather came over from Italy. So it's like really not that far back. I think a lot of people in America, like there's a big thing for people to Americanize when they came over. So we're which means like if they kind of like left there a lot behind in Europe or wherever they came from, then and they Americanized, then we're still a very young culture.
Yeah, we had to start over in some respects. I say we, I'm not actually American, but Canada and America seem very similar a lot of the time. And then we have a bit of our own thing going on.
Yeah, I love this idea of like just like consciously creating your own culture, uh,
That's
and
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Take what works from the tradition, but don't be bound by it. And don't say, like, oh, this is how I am because this is where I came from. It's like, no, no, you are you. You get to
I've
make it up as you go. You get to make it up in this moment. You're not even beholden to the person you were 5 minutes ago. It's like,
we have
make
so
a
much
choice.
access to so much like great information now, like about different cultures, and like we almost it's almost like a buffet. We get to kind of pick and choose. Like for example, like Tommy has kind of created his own culture around like R2O, and like it's a synthesis of like the 12 steps, which has like Christian roots, but obviously also very yoga heavy, which has you know Indian roots. So it's a cool blend.
Mhm. I believe it's beautiful that we have this like buffet, this menu of things
Yeah.
to choose from all over the world. And um, for me, like in my 20s, it has been so much exploration, like all over the world, cultures all over the world, to immerse myself kind of in search for myself, looking on the outside, what resonated with me and what not. And just as I heard you speak now, it resonates really with me. Also, what you said, Luke, is like maybe in the end, it's about just like, like journeying however it resonates with us, the outside or inside, and uncovering our essence of soul, uncovering who we really are. And then we can take parts, that resonate with us in the moment, maybe depending on who we are speaking with, where we are, because yes, like norms and rules and standards, they do help us to be able to communicate with each other and other humans and give us an idea how to behave in certain places. But then in the end, like, yeah, on some level, we are all humans. On some level, we all have souls. And even if you see it in a very spiritual way, right? Like we have Ahamkara, Jiva, and Brahman. So we have, where we are all one, like in all the whole. Then we have the essence of soul, and we have the ahamkara, like the human ego personality. But even the jiva, the soul, the way that I understand it, is unique, and it has a very special essence to it. And like this is definitely one journey that I am on, and like, I'm not there yet. So like I don't know, it continues, but like to get in touch with this essence of soul.
Mm. Yeah, the something you said jumped out at me there, and it's this old adage of I'm gonna go find myself. And that typically means I'm gonna go on a journey to another country or another place and go expose myself to a bunch of things as if you are somewhere out there. But just like you said, you're trying to find those points of resonance for your soul. You're trying to say, oh, here's something that I've never felt before in this body, in this life. It's like, it's this thing from this culture that's brand new. And it's like, that reminds me of something. There's some remembrance there that I can use to like bring forth the vibration of my heart or my spirit, so that it actually comes into being, and a bit more of me comes alive than was previously alive. So it is this maybe a rediscovery of you. And I don't know if that's like trying to find your like echoes of your past lives, or if it's just finding like the things which are eternally relevant to your spirit and to your soul. But yeah, there is like, as we travel from place to place, cultures behave so differently and treat each other differently and speak to each other differently and do things differently. Like, one of the things I loved about India was just how celebratory they were. It was a festival, or there was some cause for celebration pretty much continuously. It was like one festival for 2 weeks. And then when the festival ended, they were like, great festival, good job, guys. And now it's the next one. Now we're on to the the Shiva festival. And it would go into like a whole month of like Shiva stuff. And they had pretty much split up uh their search for soul resonance or connection with God or connection with divine into all of these deities, these subdivisions of the divine. And then in their celebration of each of those deities, they're calling attention to some aspect of what it is to be human and what it is to be alive. And it's like, now we're going to celebrate like the divine feminine, or now we're going to celebrate like the conquering of fear and the living beyond fear. And now we're going to celebrate like that ineffable essence, which it cannot really have words put to it, but is like just, we know it's there and it is contributing to every moment. So it's just this interesting call to attention to different subdivisions of thought or consciousness.
I really liked what you said with those different aspects of life and those different aspects of oneself, like you said in India, how the deities represent different aspects of yourself. And when I started like traveling all around the world in search of myself, like I wasn't conscious of doing it that way, like, but what resonates with me, why I see parallels, I guess like every place that I've been to kind of like may have helped me to live different aspects of myself, like in another way than they do in India, like with the deities as representative of aspects of yourself. So every place, every culture has been an opportunity to step into different aspects of myself. And also a keyword that came to me was maybe acceptance and permission to be myself. It's definitely been a journey of giving myself permission to be myself. Because, for example, being born in Germany, and there are lots of things I appreciate in Germany. Um, but for example, like I felt like my sensitivity wasn't always as appreciated in Germany as it was in other places. And being a very heart-centered person, I felt very home when I traveled to Brazil and Puerto Rico, those Latin cultures. And then as a little child, having strong intuitions already, some people in Germany like told me like I'm crazy and like, like, and I repressed it. And it was like, okay, this is like something really weird. And I tried not to have anything to do with it anymore. But then when I traveled to Taiwan to see my Taiwanese family, which is very spiritual, also when I moved to Indonesia, it's like, wow, now I get to live this part of me because here it feels socially accepted. So I was giving myself permission to live it and to explore it and to own it.
Mm.
And then yeah, so different places have made it easier for me to connect with aspects of myself and also like to train my nervous system, I guess, and my consciousness, like, hey, it's safe to be me and in all ways.
I love that. Yeah, that's really the greatest thing that we can do is give ourselves more permission to be the person that we know that we are and to get out of our own way. And yeah, as we do that, we're creating the space for other people to be themselves. And then that kind of cascades a ripple effect into creating the world that we want to inhabit, which is a world full of real people,
Yeah,
have real connection.
authenticity has been like a big thing for me this year, like just leaning into authenticity and once you kind of like once you're like authentic yourself and you start to like be authentic all the time, you realize like just how many people are inauthentic so often, which is kind of a bummer. But once you're like around like other authentic people, it's just very liberating. Um, yeah. So like I was just like working like a job in sales actually, and like sales, there's a lot of inauthenticity, and like I don't know, man, just like people are able to like fake laugh, and I'm not. It's just like, oh, I how are people so good at fake laughing? I don't know. but but the other thing I thought of was when I was at Kripalu, um, I realized like, oh, like people are here. Like some people are literally just here to like sit and do nothing and like not even go on their phones. And like people are just here to like unlock what's already inside them. They're not here to like, you know, extract something or like, you know, get something from Kripalu, but Kripalu is unlocking what they already have in them. And so it's just
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, they kind of feed each other, don't they? Like either authenticity or inauthenticity. Like when you're being inauthentic, you almost have to keep being inauthentic to hold up the facade of what you've already built because you're trying to like keep presenting some image to the world. And then that image in and of itself is already not real. So it requires you to keep like adding new like 2x4s of non-realness to maintain the stability and structure of that facade or that persona. Whereas the contrast is when you actually start to be authentic and to be received well in that authenticity, it feels so good to do that that you start wondering why you would ever not do that. And then you're like, now I can't go back because
Right.
now it actually feels satisfying to live. And I feel like that parts of me are coming alive, like my heart, or I'm feeling like this vibrancy in my cells just by actually being myself. And yeah, there's a stress, there's a pain that exists from not being yourself. And when you
Oh yeah,
actually
for sure.
begin to lift that pain, it becomes the only option.
Yeah. Yeah, like I I have like a lower tolerance like for like inauthentic small talk now that than perhaps I used to. And like I like to just like be super authentic and that'll like right off the bat like we could just like skip the small talk and just get right to like the fun part of like being, you know, vulnerable and authentic. And then people are like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, and I also like, I mean, yeah, I also understand um, there's often pain behind hiding one's true self or one's authenticity. So I have lots of understanding for that. There are fears, there are pains, because there are lots of people, you know, whether it be in their own personal lives or through their cultural, genetic inheritance, that have had traumatic experiences when they showed themselves like they were. Um, like one trend I see very strong in my personal and professional environment. Um, it's not like a super traumatic thing, like a war or like an obviously traumatic thing, but it seems to go through many areas of society. It's the thing about like being vulnerable and showing true emotions, and the fear of showing true emotions. Um, which I observe in Germany as well as in Spain, even though it is a more like, I guess, more emotional culture. Um, I see that lots of people, when they grew up, they didn't have their emotions validated. Maybe they got punished for showing their true emotions if they were uncomfortable emotions. Maybe they tried to keep up a good image by like pretending to be happy or like in positive. Well, positive is relative, and comfortable emotions and pleasant emotions all the times. And um, yeah, this is like something I see very, very strongly. And from the outside, one could say, well, yeah, okay, it's not that bad. It's like not a rape, it's not a war. There are worse things that are happening in life. But then if you look at like, the experience of the individual, of course it can be strong, and like also what goes with it. Because when we don't um, learn that our emotions are valid, we miss out on coming in touch and getting to know our authentic selves, our true needs, desires, boundaries. So there's lots and lots and lots of this in there.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
This is a real thing. It's very widespread, and like you get this war going on if you don't kind of get in touch with the emotional side. And like if you have like a lot of repressed emotions, it just causes a lot of problems that just snowball. But yeah, that's definitely a real thing. Like and one of the possible contributing factors might be that in like some countries, like I know in America, maybe in Germany too, like the kind of parenting instruction that was given to a lot of parents was, crying is bad. Like if the baby's crying, just just leave them alone, walk away. Like um go to your room. That's like a thing. Kind of like lock the kid in a room. Like if they're being bad, if they're having too many emotions, like isolate the child. That was like a big thing. Like growing up in the public school system in America, is like they're big on like isolating children who are having too many emotions, which is like crazy.
Mm.
But yeah, I can totally see how that would evolve into a culture where like emotions are not validated.
Yeah, I can just remember my childhood. Um, I don't remember as far back as being a baby and like what happened there, but there was a very conflict averse attitude in my house.
Oh yeah.
And it was a very like pleasantness enforced attitude, which was really nice to grow up in. And it just made things like it was very pleasant and it made me a very pleasant and amicable person. But at the same time, there wasn't enough space, perhaps, in one way of seeing it, for the expression of emotion or for, to let emotions flow. And when emotions aren't flowing, we're kind of stuffing them down. And then when we're stuffing them down, then we're not actually as in touch with our emotion. And I do notice that like when I was in middle school and when I was in high school, my experience of life felt kind of flat a lot of time. I didn't really have that much emotion. I didn't really have that much feeling. I was intellectually smart and I was thinking about things, but I wasn't really like in like the heightened felt beingness of life. And part of that was probably because I was stifling emotions for a good chunk of my upbringing. And like, however well intentioned that was, and like, I love my parents and I'm so glad that they raised me the way they did. But, there's certain things come out of things that you do repeatedly. And there's a place for anger. There's a place for the expression of sadness and the resolution of things. And especially this concept or this tendency to sweep things under the rug and lead and like prevent a resolution to something, I think is very damaging, or it causes the problems that we're talking about here. If we can't actually like feel the effects of our actions, if like something has gone badly, and then instead of like some consequence to that thing taking place and some resolution taking place, it's just kind of like, oh, don't worry about it, or let's just forget about that because that's kind of a little tricky to to be involved with. So let's just kind of like smooth it out to pretend that didn't happen, and on we go, and everyone just forgets about it. It's like, but we don't forget. It gets stuck somewhere. So
Yeah, the body keeps the score. There's a book about it from like Thundercock, I think is his name, if anyone is interested in the science part of it. But yeah, like there's so much magic in getting to know oneself and what one really wants through getting in touch with all of our emotions, including anger. Anger is often masked pain and also shows us maybe like things that we don't want, even though our minds may tell us, no, everything is okay. This is how things are supposed to be. Maybe we just learned it because, like, whatever, societal conditioning or the environment, but our emotions show us like, hey, okay, maybe something isn't really right to my heart and soul. Maybe the soul, and this is like where we're back at the core of our essence, is signaling us like, okay, maybe there's another way. Maybe this other way you haven't experienced yet in this life. No, you know it, but maybe there's something else, because through exploring your emotions, even the uncomfortable ones like anger, sadness, grief, panic, all of those things, like you may get in touch with a deeper place within you where this wisdom is stored. And yes, it can be uncomfortable to go there, but at the end, you'll be at a place that's like, huh, maybe I actually like do deserve this and that, what someone else told you you can't have, like be that society or other people or like just your own mind. And like, oh, maybe. And sometimes it's not even thinking, sometimes it's just a feeling. So maybe like someone has felt unloved for a very, very long time, processes their emotions, and all of a sudden they feel so much love. And it's like, oh my God, where is this coming from? So it's not that uncomfortable emotions are bad. They're actually messengers. They are here to help us. And often we try to ban those messengers, and then they go to their room, like being locked up in the room like the little kids. Um, but if we
Right,
forget
what's
about
what's the
them,
message
like,
there? Like if you punish a kid for having emotions, or not, like not being able to follow the rules exactly, the message is like that's not okay. Like
yeah,
yeah, if you
it's
get kicked out of the group, the message is being angry or whatever is not okay. And
exactly. And on some level, like, depending on how the kid understands it, like they can have all kinds of beliefs, like it's not safe to be themselves. It's not
right.
safe to say no. They need to say yes to everything. And that's like where people are created who have difficulties with saying no, with boundaries, for example, or standing up for themselves.
I love this. I just want to reinforce something you said, which I feel is so valuable. It's just this idea that feelings may in fact be messengers, or maybe trying to convey you or push you towards something that you don't know that you don't know. So it is like something outside of your lived experience, which is not even within your sphere of conscious awareness. But it's like by following that feeling, you may discover something which is beyond the periphery of your current understanding. And as such, your world expands. And then there's more. And then the world opens up and changes color. And there's something new becomes possible, which previously just didn't exist. And so there is great
Absolutely.
value in following the feelings where they go.
Right. And I'll tell you guys, like I can get very like locked into what I'm doing and like very focused. And then like some other part of me is like trying to get my attention, and I'm not listening. And then it's just like the emotion gets bigger and bigger until I have this like crazy strong emotion. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Where is this coming from? And I'm like, oh, it's time to leave. I'm 5 minutes late. Or like my shoes untied. It's like some little thing, but if I ignore it, it builds into this huge emotion. And I just have to recognize that like it's simply it's not like it does kind of make a little bit of sense that I'm having this strong emotion. It's to get my attention that there's some other thing I need to address immediately.
Yeah, and it wants to help you. And this is like the beautiful thing. Like, even though it can be so uncomfortable and annoying in the moment, if this emotion doesn't let you do what you wanted to do, right? It's like it sucks. But then it has your best interest at heart deep down, like, because it can show you those possibilities of being, of living that you may have not experienced or thought of before. So in the end, in my experience, professionally and personally, it's worth it to give it the time and space. And I also understand, there may be situations where you really need to do something, and then the strong emotions is there. So maybe that is something, sort of a moment where you could say, like, okay, like whatever part of me that is, I hear you. I'm here for you. I really need to do this now, but I promise I'll come back to you later. But then you should keep your promise.
Mhm.
Right, right.
So
I like
I
that.
just want to explore this idea that there may be a lot of people out there who are very intellectually smart, and they have formed some idea, whether they are fully aware of it or not, that they understand what the world is, that they know what their world is and how it all works. And within that, there may be some sort of pessimism. Within that, they may be like, well, this is just what life is, and I got to put up with it, and it's things are as they are, and just got to pull up my bootstraps and try to make it work, and find some small pleasures in this dreary world. And that is, that's a worldview that makes sense to them. But what is not included in that is what we're talking about here, these things which lie beyond the periphery of that understanding, things that they don't know. Just like I didn't know that I didn't have to entertain every thought that came into my head until I was 28. Then it's like, I didn't know that was an option. I thought I needed to like pay attention to every thought that I had and give it some room, and that it was me, and that it was me having those thoughts.
Right.
And then
Me too.
yeah.
I
And
just
that is
learned that.
what a freeing thing to actually recognize, like, oh, I'm not even necessarily the one initiating these thoughts. These could just be coming from my subconscious and unconscious and old patterns, and like just like my assistant, the assistant of the mind, providing me with some fodder for the moment, that which might be relevant and might not be relevant. But just like that was an experience, or the inclusion of that knowledge was an experience of stepping outside of what I thought life was. And I think that, or no, the recognition that that is possible can shift this pessimism that a lot of people feel about their life, about like the inevitability of life, or the like the that life must be hard, or that life must be dreary. It's like only within the worldview that you're currently entertaining, and beyond that there may be a lot more.
Yeah, I guess like if you're like very focused and are only in the mind, you kind of like, I see it like a forest. So if you imagine the brain like a forest, and thought patterns are like pathways in this forest. Um, like, like the older that we get, we just like form those pathways, and we just go them again and again and again. And we are so used to them. So we don't entertain other possibilities, nor to get out of the forest if we've never like made a pathway out of the forest. And I guess this is like where all of those amazing other techniques come in, like meditation, where you go beyond the forest, where you learn to make new connections in the forest, new pathways, or connecting with your emotions, seeing like, okay, what's the wisdom behind it without getting like lost and drowned in it. There's so many amazing techniques to be able to process your emotion, and extract the wisdom and the essence of it, and to get in touch with like who you really are and what you really want. But yeah, back to the brain, they also like brain studies, which is quite interesting. So people who are very rational, linear thinking have a tendency for pessimism. That's like a psychological brain study. And I also found that quite intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. Like, I would say I fall on the rational, like, thinker side of things, like very intellectual, very, math and science oriented coming up, and I'm kind of evolving away from that slowly. That's just like the natural progression, how it was for me. And yeah, I definitely had a lot of pessimism coming up, in part because like the culture, like there's like it was always like the kind of like the this like I grew up atheist, like never went to church, like really no spiritual practice at all. But it was like climate was like the big thing, like climate, like is like we're burning gas, so we can't stop and the world's gonna burn up. And that was like the big message that like everyone believed in. Like we didn't believe in God, but we believed in like climate was gonna like kill us all. So like so anyways, but to that note, yeah, like when you try and like intellectualize the world, um yeah, it's just very cold. I think of math as a little bit cold, and like yeah, but there's much more like warmer, like Nani, you strike me as like a very warm, energetic person who's done a lot of spiritual traveling like around the world, but also within yourself. And I know nothing about you, so but I'm willing to guess that you've been like on your path for a while now. Do you want to fill us in?
Oof, I wouldn't know how to summarize that. I mean, thank you for, yeah, seeing me this way. I appreciate that. And I guess like I mean, I'm obviously still on my path. I keep learning every day, you
Every
know,
day.
like I still have roller coasters. They're not, I wouldn't say like not as intense as they used to before, because like, like I still feel very deeply, like I feel joy very deeply. I also feel like sadness and pain very deeply, but I feel more stable with that than I used to. So if I would fill you in quickly, I guess like as a younger human, I have repressed my emotions a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. And then there came a time where, yeah, life signaled me through repeating patterns on the outside, step by step, that wasn't really a good idea if I wanted to live a better life. And like, I mean, I was educated like on one side very rationally, logically. I studied business administration, which is a very like, science and linear calculating oriented study thing. But yeah, I observe patterns repeating in my life, and I love efficiency. So maybe that's like the German part of me, like
Mm.
I like to have things now. And if I want things to improve in my life, I want them to improve now. And I used to do things a lot externally in the past until I learned that the better way, the faster way, most of the time, like, yes, I can address things on the outside, I can, like, communicate, but most of the times the work is within myself. So, from being very externally oriented, like, I gradually um, shifted more and more attention to, like, okay, like, what do I need to change within myself? Like, what do I need to shift or just accept within myself so the outside can change? So there is like this desire for improvement of experience of life all over again. And yeah, I learned so many amazing things from so many amazing people all over the world that have helped me on this journey. I'm obviously still going. At the beginning of it, when I started to face and feel my emotions, I was like often very, very overwhelmed because everything was just so intense, and
Mm.
I haven't really learned how to deal with it like in school or nowhere. I'm very grateful, like I had amazing teachers by my side. Um,
So what would you say was like the first step for you?
I guess the first step of what?
Like what first thing that pops in your mind, the first step down this path that you're on now.
Yeah,
First thing that pops into
acknowledging.
your mind.
I think the first step, that first thing that came was acknowledging, like
Oh,
acknowledging.
okay.
Yeah, that's definitely the first step. And
You're
I
like,
guess that's just
oh,
like
I want to go in a
acknowledging.
totally different direction because I've acknowledged that, my current direction is not for me, or like maybe Germany's not for me, or like what,
Mm,
like how did,
no, that one was
what
more
was it that you were
gradual.
acknowledging? Like just
Yeah, I
you're
guess
kind of
like
like
what has.
you're acknowledging your true self. Would that be closer?
Mm, I think all of these things, like with going out of Germany and like all of this was more gradual. I think like the stronger points were often some kind of like emotional conflicts in my life. For example, breakups.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, and breakups were like, okay, and then like in the beginning, and this younger version of me, like, okay, why is this happening? And this and that, and like whatever, like overthinking it. Not knowing that, hey, like solution to all of those things, like, like it's not like in looking like externally and asking over analyzing it, but actually like it's always opportunities to learn to love myself more and to take responsibility for my life and for my experience. And I think those have been like, the points of, okay, acknowledging like, okay, there's something that I don't like in my experience right now. And acceptance is very important, but I think it's like, for me personally, it's very important to see it this way. Like, I can accept that the situation is painful, I can accept that something sucks, and I can have the intention and the desire to wanting to make a difference in my life. And thus in life in general, because this is also something I have learned over the past. Like, I need to start within myself. like from working so much on the outside, doing so many like social ecological projects, trying to like whatever improve things on the outside. It's like, no. I need to start with myself first. And from here, it's where I can truly like give to others, from where I can really make improvements. And this is why I have the power and the control, because I can get lost and like complaining about like whatever is not going right in politics and the world and in climate. But if I can't make a change, what's the point of like spending energy and time there if I can use this time and energy instead to love myself more and thus provide for something better for everything else that I'm experiencing and perceiving on the outside as well.
Yeah, that is
Which
just
goes
such
deep because
a more
yeah.
worthy use of your energy, is to amplify yourself so that you can affect change in your immediate surroundings and perhaps beyond. But yeah, I think I'm just struck by just this trope, perhaps you mentioned breakups, of like, let's say a person who has just broken up and they're telling their friends about it, and they're like, why do I keep dating assholes? It's just like, why do all the men suck in this country or this city? It's like, what's wrong with all of these men? It's like, well, that's one way of seeing it. The other thing is, what can I change about myself so that either A, I'm attracting different men into my immediate surroundings,
I just
or
want to
B,
add
it's like I'm not, finding myself in these situations in the first place. There's such a strong tendency for the ego, and I even find this, I have to override this impulse all the time. Whenever there's conflict, we're looking outside of ourselves because our eyes are pointing this way. They're not pointing inside. That wouldn't be very helpful. But we do we're constantly, our brain is trying to like find objects and apply significance to them with the things that we're seeing. So part of that, I'm sure, comes into this very natural tendency to blame the other person whenever there is some form of conflict and we're in a relationship or something's going on. It's like, oh, something is wrong over here. Something is wrong in my external. And maybe wrong is the wrong word, but we're looking externally when really we could shift that gaze internally. And then that would actually set us up for success in future scenarios, and maybe even this scenario.
I'm reminded of like one thing Tommy said was I wasn't comfortable in a relationship and I wasn't comfortable single. So what's the common denominator? It's me. And then yeah, the other thing he said one time was like, I asked my teacher, like, how do we make the biggest change in the world? And the teacher said that we change yourself. So,
Yeah, we are the common denominator in all of our circumstances.
right.
I really like this perspective, and it has helped me so much and it's still helping me so much because yes, the upbringing is, like, and I mean, like the upbringing that I experienced in Germany is like, yes, looking for someone to blame on the outside, over analyzing it, being in the mind, like not facing the pain, the emotions, like all the things like in the subconsciousness, our own shadow. And what has helped me so much is like this take part of like taking responsibility, like, yes, like what do I need to change? And also to see um, it with this principle that the outside world is a reflection of the inside world.
Mhm.
And that actually, like, for me, is very empowering because if the outside world is a reflection of my inner world, I can change. And this, again, is way more efficient, making changes within myself and like trying to fight against like windmills on the outside. Um, and with this, like even like those conflicts, be it like breakups or like other crises in life, can become very empowering opportunities because you look at the situation, you're like, okay, like how am I feeling about the situation? Like, what is the situation showing me? And then where is this reflecting parts within myself? So called shadow parts, like parts that we may not be consciously aware of, but that are there. It doesn't mean all the times, like if something is annoying you on the outside that you're exactly the same. Maybe it means that you're not giving yourself permission to be this way, like, so for example, if like people are so annoyed at someone expressing themselves authentically, maybe those people like want to express themselves more authentically as well. but because they have learned that it's the wrong thing to do, they kind of like, project the disagreement about being authentic on this person and so on. But yeah, so things annoy us in life or that like we feel mad about can show us amazing things about ourselves. And this is like where so much healing and coming whole can take place. And then with this, easily shift our outer reality as well, because the moment that we embrace a part within ourselves and do or not do whatever is needed to do with this part, our experience of life can change across different areas of life all at the same time. So, including relationships, health, career, and general well being.
I want to give people an upgrade on this word responsibility that has been used. It's like, I took responsibility for my situation. I took responsibility for myself and what I'd been up to. The initial interpretation of that might be, oh, now I have more work on my plate. Like now I have more responsibilities. It's like, no. What you have done is you have given yourself increased ability to respond. This is what responsibility is. And so this is, we're giving ourselves an upgrade on our ability to actually respond to our environment in a way of our choosing, as opposed to being reactive to everything that's happening to us. This is what it means to take responsibility for ourselves. And yeah, it provides this ability to respond in a more conscious or a way that creates better outcomes. We're going to take a little 5-minute break and then we'll be back.
Awesome. Just here for the conversation.
So I want to tell you about an experience that I had last night and see what your perhaps analogous experiences are. I lucid dreamed last night for the first time in quite a while, because I haven't really been applying the techniques that make that happen more easily, or even being very diligent with my evening meditation. But I had a lucid dream last night, and I broke away from whatever the situation was, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm obviously dreaming right now. But then I was struck by just how much I had a body. And I was like, huh, I have legs. I have a body. I'm moving it around right now. And I was like, this feels a lot like being awake, but I know that I'm asleep. And I wasn't convinced. I wasn't lured back into the trance that I actually was awake. But it was so interesting just how palpably I had a body. And I was like, wow, I have this body. I was like, okay, well, now I'm gonna go somewhere else, because I didn't like the situation I was in. I was like, I'm going somewhere else. And so I walked through this like red door, and then beyond that there was like I had to go through a window, and then it just went on like that and on like that for a little while, where I just had to keep going through things like this red door, this red window, this small opening. And it's some part of me was thinking like, oh, okay, like you're not really getting anywhere, like this is just the dream placing things in front of you. I don't know if you're ever actually going to stop going through these doors. But part of me was really enjoying the process of going through these openings, because I was using my dream body. And I was like, I had to like lift my legs and go through these openings. And it was just such a cool sensation to actually like so palpably experience that I had a body, and then I was moving it in ways that I wanted to within this dream space. And even within the book that I was reading some time ago, Lucid Dreaming, that was the encouragement, was when you realize that you're dreaming, a way to stabilize your lucidity was to really use your dream body. They said like run around or like do some physical things with your dream body, and that will stabilize your consciousness in lucidity. And I wasn't doing this intentionally at the time. I was just having fun playing with what really did feel like my actual physical body. So anyway, that was the experience. That I don't know that it really, I think eventually I drifted back off into unconsciousness after going through 6 or 7 doors or windows or something. But that's just pretty much what I had to share. And yeah, I'm just curious, what is your experience of dream lucidity like, Nani? Does that happen with any regularity for you?
It's been a while, to be honest. Like, maybe it's also location dependent. I don't know. Like, I had phases in my life where I was dreaming very intensely, also like lucidly, but it's like so far in my memory now because I don't know. Um, I do like Yeah, I think for me it really depends on where I am. Yeah.
Hmm.
They're like different places or maybe different energetic states that make it easier to prepare for it. I think the last time is it's a few months back. So I don't really recall it right now.
Yeah, it's hard
That's
to remember
Um,
dreams. I think like naturally like they they have to flush themselves away so you don't end up living in like a dream world versus like the actual world. But
yeah.
it is fascinating how they just like they naturally dispose of themselves over time. Like even if you wake up and you kind of remember some things about the dream, by the afternoon it's usually gone
Hmm.
unless you write it down.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. It's like they have a self-recycling component to them or something where they're not interfering with your waking memories so that you don't just have this huge mass of information that you're dealing with in your own memory. It's like that would be too
yeah,
much. And that would be confusing because then there'd be this like which part of it was dream, which part of it wasn't. So there's this natural self-purification mechanism of forgetting about your dreams.
actually,
Yeah.
now like that I hear you speaking, like I remember, there were times where I was like dreaming so intensely, and I kind of felt that I was sorting things out in my dreams. But then I was also sleeping a lot. So sleeping lots of hours because I didn't want to get up. Didn't want to wake up because like until it felt like, I had all things resolved in my dreams already. And yeah, so I definitely had those phases of my life and they may come back. Um, I think one reason is that I just like, yeah, it depends on location. And then also, of course, if I put an alarm, and recently, like, I've been putting alarms. So that may be like one reason. It's like, okay.
One of
Yeah, I
the
think
tricks in the dream book was you set an alarm and then you get up and you do a little bit of meditation and then you go back to bed. So kind of like
Mm,
morning sadhana, but then you go back to sleep afterwards, or even
right.
just going right back to sleep. But it's like you have more REM sleep at the end of the sleep cycle.
Yep.
So I think even my lucid dream was from waking up in the morning and then going back to bed. Uh, but that seems to be something where it's, we have more consciousness available to us in that window.
So sometimes I'll just like blast out of a dream. I don't remember what the dream is, but I have like a couple words I need to write down, and then I'm like, and then I just drop the pen and go back into the dream. But I couldn't tell you what the dream is, but I have the words that I wrote down, and it's yeah, we won't get into that. But this other thing that happened was I woke up in the middle of the night and I had well it was 4:20 in the morning. But I had this I had this like image of a movie, and it was Matt Damon, and he's like, oh, this computer's being weird, and he like walks out of the room into a different room, and I was like, oh, I need to go to the other side of my room to check the weather on my phone, and that was whatever the obvious thing I had to do for some reason. So I go do that. I check the weather, and there's like this giant storm like about to like hit, and it was like I had just woken up, I suppose because the pressure changes. And then I looked out my window. It is 4:20 in the morning, and like my neighbor is like outside on his porch, like smoking a cigarette. I was like, oh, there's Ryan. Like he got the message from the storm too. And then I just went back to bed.
Yeah,
I was
this
like,
is
the
dream
storm doesn't
logic
need me
right
right
there.
now.
Like, oh yeah, of course. Like he got the message too. So yeah.
From the electromagnetic field of this like lightning storm. It's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I wonder if there's greater thought transference for humans during periods of like electrostatic stuff in the air. Like, are we able to?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Probably.
It definitely affects your brain functioning, like the atmosphere and the electric and the magnetic pole of the earth and like all these things, and think about birds. They fly like thousands of miles. How do they even know which direction to go? They don't have a compass, they don't have GPS. They're tuning into the electromagnetic fields, and they have like a built-in compass.
Yeah, they have some interesting navigation systems that we still don't quite know what's going on. Same thing for fish. Like they don't really understand how fish are always going back to the same place to lay their eggs as where they were born, and like navigating huge distances to and like huge efforts like against the current to get to this one place because it just has to be there and nowhere else.
So we're like, related to fish distantly, right? And like we're probably downstream of their evolution, right? So a lot of like the cells are very similar. Like it's just like it's crazy how like just a few DNA changes like makes like a different species. But the point is this, like we have some very similar tools. We just don't develop them because we don't need to.
mm,
But if you want to develop them, you can consciously tune your sense to the weather, and like cows can predict when it rains. And I remember Sadhguru talking about how he wanted to learn how to do that, and now he can predict it when it rains because he just pays very close attention to minute changes in the climate.
that is so cool. Yeah, that's such an encouraging notion, is that we can begin to become attuned to certain things that otherwise our organism is filtering out because we don't want that much input of information. It's just too much.
Right.
But it's like, I do want this information. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to start allowing through some of that information now. We're going to give you some faculties that are able to receive that information.
It's such a beautiful example for me for so many things. Like one is like how much we can connect with this earth if we want to. And having lived in many different settings, like in big cities as well as in the jungle, it's I forgot what I wanted to say. I thought of the jungle and I was like, I was
Became
there.
entranced by the
I was there.
beautiful memories
Yeah,
of the
no, but
jungle.
like there's like so many different ways of being that come with it. So I forgot what I wanted to say, but like one thing to this is like living in like a very like remote place on a remote island where I was managing a luxury resort, small boutique luxury resort. So like very natural remote setting. It was like my senses became so attuned to my surroundings and like I I allowed my system to be so much more open to senses that when I went to Germany to visit friends and family, like I almost broke down in the metro because it's just too much information for my system.
Mm.
And then obviously, like when I spend times in bigger cities, I try to dial down on this sensitivity. Um, and then going back to what I wanted to say earlier. So it's so beautiful how much we can attune ourselves to earth and to nature. And the other thing that I really like about this example is like just another example of what's possible, like even though we're not taught in school, like, hey, you can forecast the weather by attuning to it. Just like one example of how many possibilities there are, what we can actually do if we just decide to, if we just want to.
But yeah, I wonder if that's partly why some people don't feel that happy in big cities, is because they actually have to down regulate their sensitivity and their attunement just in order to not be swarmed with information. And they probably are already being swarmed anyway. There's a lot of input. There's a lot of sensory and informational input if you're living in a big metropolitan area. And yeah, your system would become attuned to that. It would be like, okay, we're just going to start filtering out a lot of this stuff because this is too much.
Yeah, for me right now, like due to some jobs, like I am spending some time in more like city-like places. Um, and I notice it very strongly in my system, like when I spend like too much time there, it's like, whoa, 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 what's happening? Like I find myself kind of like in a current of like thoughts and ideas. I was like, oh, okay, like, like, whoa, I need a moment to ground back and go into nature and come back to myself to not be swept up in like um currents of maybe beliefs that are swirling around there, of things that
Mm.
are, like I don't really like identify with myself as such, but yeah. So that's an interesting observation for me right now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's like if you don't like leave your house or like, go outside, that would be like a small example that maybe some people can connect with. Like if you don't look up from the screen for a long time, you end up kind of like in this like stagnant little swampy like mind area where and then you like stand up and go outside and like the just kind of just like releases, all and like the current of the environment just kind of like washes away all the stagnant water that but
Yeah.
I feel that to a greater extent, like when I don't leave like my little city, like for a long time, or if I don't travel for a long time, like I'm like, wow, like I'm really craving to like get out in the mountains. So it's like just a bigger area. Kind of like expands my mind, I guess. And you get that like, yeah, just like connectedness to the larger self.
Yeah, big environments are good for that. They just kind of naturally pull me into a more expansive state too. And I can see a long distance when I can like see the sky
Right.
above me. And when the walls are not there.
I think
Um,
maybe like some people get that from like looking at a big city skyline.
yeah, I'm
I'm
sure
not
people
one of those
can.
people, but
Yeah, I don't want to hate on city dwellers too hard. I think a lot of people make it work and they make it work really well. I just think there's certain things that, you
I get
know,
overwhelmed by like big ugly buildings.
yeah, there's challenges to it. And perhaps by identifying those challenges, certain solutions can present themselves. So I want to be solution oriented whenever possible. And it all starts with awareness. But we can only get so far by talking, and eventually we need to meditate or do certain things which make it easier, and we aren't just adding information to the pile. Yeah, but maybe that's something for another time, because I feel like we've chatted for a while here tonight and it's been great. And I, for one, have enjoyed it. And I thank you all so much for listening and for being here.
Yeah, it was great, Nani. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, guys. So beautiful to talk to you.
Good night to one and all, or good day,
Wonderful.
or good morning, whatever it might happen to be. Goodbye.